Venerable monks, leaders from the political system, my very dear friend Sarath Fernando, the organizations that have put together this event at such short notice. It's a joy and a pleasure to be able to join you today at a moment that marks so many things. 20 years since the signing of the GATT agreement, which led to the formation of WTO. So we have 20 years to see what did that promise of globalization bring us. And what it brought us is collapse at every level. Collapse at the level of moral values that have guided societies to sustain themselves. Because greed does not sustain society. Greed has existed, but it has always been contained. Globalization was basically greed is good. The more you can rob, the more you can steal, the more you can grab, the more you will have freedom. The word free trade, in fact, is freedom for those who want to exploit the earth and society. It is not the freedom of society to protect the earth and serve people. For the last 2 days, I was at the Metta convention organized by the Sarvodaya movement. And repeatedly, in every talk, in every meditation, the phrase that came up was, "May all beings be happy and well." In India, we say, "Sarve bhavantu sukhina." And Buddha, of course, has repeatedly talked about all beings being sentient, and therefore needing to have our conscious inclusion in a circle of wide and deep compassion. I was just reading in today's newspaper Evo Morales' statement at the G77 meeting that took place recently in Bolivia on June the 14th, and the President of Sri Lanka is there, right there in the front row. And the statement of Evo Morales, the last para is, "Well-being for everyone and the provisions of basic services as a human right." He says the worst tyranny faced by humankind is allowing basic services to be under the control of transnational corporations. This practice subjugates humanity to the specific interests and commercial aims of a minority who become rich and powerful at the expense of the life and security of other persons. That is why we claim that basic services are inherent to the human conditions. How can a human being live without potable water? If human rights make us equal, then the right to these basic services is basic to human rights. Our need for water, like our need for light, makes us all equal. And I would add to this the need for food. And food begins with seed. That is why the seed law being discussed in Sri Lanka right now is so important. Now, I, as was mentioned, started out life as a physicist. But if I started to look at agriculture, it was because of the violence I saw in 1984, the rise of extremism in the state of Punjab in India, which is celebrated as the place where the Green Revolution was first implemented and successfully implemented. But it was success for a model of development, but failure for the people and for the earth. Punjab is among the states today with the highest rates of farmer suicides. A cancer train leaves the state of Punjab from Bhatinda, loaded with cancer victims, to go for treatment to a charitable hospital set up by the Jain community in Bikaner in Rajasthan. The water of Punjab is disappearing so fast because the chemicals for the Green Revolution require 10 times more water to produce the same amount of food. And Punjab means the land of the 5 rivers. Panj, Ab is water. Today the land of the 5 rivers is drying up because of this excessive use of water, the water mining from the ground. And there are predictions that at the rate at which water is being mined, by 2020 agriculture might become impossible in Punjab because tube wells are already in some places at 1,000 feet. And beyond a point that you can't have the kind of energy you need to be able to pump up the water. Half of the soils of Punjab are dead and dying. Half the soils. You don't see diversity. You don't see the kind of diversity that is laid out on this stage and is growing in the beautiful gardens and farms of Sri Lanka. "20 years of globalization have shown us that a model based on corporate greed cannot sustain society, and it cannot sustain the earth. It cannot sustain society even in rich countries. 2008, a world in which the economy of real people producing real wealth, real food, real nutrition was transformed into the fictitious economy of finance moving around the world, 60 times more than the real wealth in the world, $3 trillion of speculation, clicks of buttons on computer screens, brought the world down. Wall Street is where it happened, through fictitious finance, creating fictitious instruments like derivatives to multiply money. And money was defined as wealth. Way back, Aristotle had differentiated between oikonomia, the art of living, because oikos is home, it is life, it is the ecosystem, it is the planet. Economy is supposed to be the management of that home. Ecology is supposed to be the science of that home. Aristotle had defined economia as the art of living, which means the art of knowing how you live with the earth family. And he had defined the term money making, which is what we define as economy today, as chrematistics. He called it the art of money making. Two totally different enterprises. The art of money making is not the art of living. And today all of development, all of growth is defined only in terms of one measure, the art of money making. So you can, you are one of the richest surviving forest countries of the world. You and Costa Rica. It's very easy to create growth for 5 years, 10 years by chopping all those forests down and losing all the ecological services they provide, all the real wealth that those forests provide, including the foods, including the medicinal plants, including the watershed functions, including the biodiversity. It used to be the case that we didn't measure the value of nature. Those who want to exploit nature are giving a price to it, but price is not value. Value asks you to protect that which is valuable. Price calls on you to exploit that which you can make money out of. And I am very privileged, blessed, because I was invited to a meeting in 1987 because of the work I had done on the Green Revolution and my book, The Violence on the Green Revolution. The meeting was in 1987 in Geneva. It was called the Laws of Life, on the implications of the new biotechnologies, the new genetic engineering, the new tools of taking genes from one organism, the human being into a cow, or a pig into a cabbage, or a bacteria into this very famous case we had in India, bacterial genes into the brinjal. The tools were created in universities in the US, but they were patented by companies who had sold us chemicals. They were known as agrichemicals, but the roots of all agrichemicals were in the war. The entire age of chemicals was developed for tools of killing. Explosive factories were making bombs. Older chemical industries made nerve gases that were used for the concentration camps, the killing of people in concentration camps. And in fact, the chemical industry for the war had created a cartel. At that time, it was called IG Farben. IG Farben was tried in the Nuremberg trials after the war. They were recognized as war criminals, but they modified themselves after the war and turned exactly those chemicals that kill life into agrochemicals for agriculture. And then they changed the entire paradigm of agriculture. From knowing the ecological processes of how the soil renews itself, how pollinators work, how diversity controls pests, how to increase productivity through diversity, into a very crude paradigm of introducing chemicals for warfare into agriculture. Now, if I take a gun and I shoot, that is a technology of killing. I don't have to know who you are. I don't have to know anything about you. If a drone is sent on Afghanistan, that drone doesn't have to know anything about what's going on in the village. Are the children at a wedding party? Or are they terrorists? There's no distinction. So in fact, technologies of violence are blind technologies. The fact that they're efficient at killing does not mean they're efficient at maintaining life support systems on this planet. And that is the confusion that has been maintained. The latest generation of technologies is genetic engineering. And at that meeting in 1987, the old chemical industry said it very honestly. There was no GMO in the world at that time. They were planning the world of GMOs. They said, if we do not do genetic engineering, we can't declare that we have made, invented, and created the seed. So through genetic engineering, we can say this is our invention. We've added a new gene. And through that, claim to be inventors, take a patent, create an ownership through intellectual property rights, and collect royalties from peasants. They also very honestly said that it wasn't enough to implement these laws of ownership on seed and ownership of life in USA and Europe, because the 5 big giants that control all this are European and American. The top 5 are Monsanto, Syngenta, DuPont, Dow, Bayer. They were all in the list of chemical companies earlier, the war industry. They are now the controllers of seed and life on earth. And that's why I sometimes say, when they define GMO, they're actually saying God or creation, move over. We will now define ourselves to be creators of life, and we will collect royalties from around the world. Monsanto admitted in 1995, after the World Trade Organization was established, they said in writing this agreement on intellectual property in the World Trade Organization, we were the patient, the diagnostician, and the physician all in one. We defined a problem and we offered a solution. We wrote an agreement, took it to our government, which then imposed it on the rest of the world. And what was the problem they defined? They said it is a problem that farmers save seeds. Because as long as farmers are saving seeds, the market for selling seeds that are patented and owned and bring back a royalty cannot be created. So their single point agenda became how to criminalize farmers saving seeds. They had thought, in their arrogance, that by the year 2000, and they said it at this 1987 meeting, they said by the year 2000, all seeds in the world will be genetically engineered and patented. And I took a pledge inside my heart. And I said, from now onwards, all I'll do is save seeds to protect life on earth. And started Navdanya, the movement for seed saving. But also took a commitment that we won't let the obscenity of patenting life spread around the world. Those who have created wars and made money from wars, those who have colonized society and made money out of colonization, have this illusion that they can keep telling lies and everyone will believe it. And the illusion of our times is intellectual property rights on living systems. Mechanical systems, we have no problem. Artificially created manufacture, no problem. But life is a continuity of creation. Life makes itself. Creation makes itself. In a network of relationships. If a company adds a gene, and this is usually a toxic gene, there are only 2 applications, but BT crops which add a bacterial toxin into the plant so that the plant is producing a toxin in every cell all the time. So basically toxic producing plants, poison producing plants. The second is a herbicide resistant gene, herbicide resistance to chemicals like Roundup. This too is a toxic gene. That's all we've got. In 20 years, Navdanya prepared a report of what have GMOs done across the world. And we got scientists and communities and movements to do their own research in their own countries. Because we found this to be beneficial in 2 ways. You get the truth, because people who are suffering will tell the truth about that suffering. But second is you do it with no cost, 0 cost. Because those who are struggling want to tell their story. And we pulled it together, and at the end of it, this is a synthesis. I was sitting and holding my head because I thought Argentina and Brazil and the US, they were doing well. People aren't doing well. The farmers aren't doing well. Monsanto's doing very well. Because everywhere their genetically modified corn and genetically modified soya is bringing them royalties. And the reason these 2 crops are spreading is because for every increased acre planted, a royalty comes back. I had a wonderful dinner yesterday and I was counting, I think there were about 8 plants, I don't know. And we built a movement for biodiversity. But your biodiversity is so rich. You are so privileged. All of those wonderful dishes I had yesterday. No one is collecting a royalty, but everyone is getting nutrition. Because these are trees and shrubs and plants in everyone's backyards. But as the industry likes to say, these are just weeds. If they are not traded globally under globalization, and they are not the 8 commodities that go back and forth, rice and wheat, corn and soya, palm oil now, they're not food. They have defined our food as non-food. And they have defined non-food as food. Because no one was supposed to eat genetically modified corn and soya. Anyway, at the end of the writing of the report, I kept thinking to myself, what do we call this? Originally, I was going to call it a assessment of GM crops. And then I decided, no, we were going to call it the GMO Emperor Has No Clothes. You remember the Hans Christensen story? Where there are these weavers who pretend to be weaving beautiful cloth, and they say to the emperor that only those who are intelligent will see your dress. Now the king knew he was wearing nothing, but he didn't want to sound stupid, so he said, beautiful dress. The courtiers didn't want to sound stupid, they said, what a wonderful dress. And it was only a little child who had not been brainwashed who said, but the emperor is naked. And we are in that kind of situation. We need to recognize that the emperor of globalization, the emperor of genetically modified crops, is absolutely naked. We should not be clapping for the naked emperor. We should be protecting our indigenous wealth in biodiversity, in Ayurveda. Ayurveda is so much more sophisticated as a health system than the chop and paste job that allopathy does. Allopathy is the same. You really don't know what's going on. And you shoot an antibiotic here, chop off a leg there. It's all extremely simple. There are only two ways in which genetic engineering is done. You shoot a gene through a gene gun. That's what it's called. Or you infect the plant with a plant cancer. Sophisticated knowledge would not need that. It would not allow it. The idea of patenting life and owning life has led to a crazy epidemic. I was just sitting, there's this beautiful neem that has been used for decoration. One of my favorite trees. 1984, after the Bhopal disaster, I started a campaign called No More Bhopal's Plant a Neem. 10 years later, we find it has been patented. We gave the name biopiracy to this phenomena of patenting the knowledge of thousands of years that cultures have had. It took me 11 years to fight that case. The patent was jointly held by the US Department of Agriculture, which at that time was saying government has no business to be in business. And while they were telling us to have government step out of water, provisioning of health and provisioning of education, they were joining with businesses to take over the wealth of the world. USDA with W.R. Grace had taken this one patent we challenged. 11 years later, that patent was struck down at the European Patent Office. The Basmati, which means the queen of aroma, was patented by a Texas company. Before that case, 4 years, it was struck down. Monsanto patented an ancient Indian wheat, which does not give rise to gluten allergies, because in the West, because of the kind of breeding they've done, to increase the gluten in order to increase the elasticity, in order to do mechanical baking and processing of wheat products, everyone has gluten allergies. No one can touch wheat. So let's patent this and grab the global market. Before that case, they had to drop that patent. We've done an analysis of 9,000 patents on Ayurvedic knowledge. 9,000 patents in the US Patent Office. This is an epidemic of piracy. And if we do not assert ourselves, we will be paying royalties for what is ours and getting poorer by the day. How poor people can become is so clear from the case of the genetically modified BT cotton that was introduced illegally in India in 98. I had to sue Monsanto. 2002, they managed to get their permissions. But since they entered India with hybrid cotton and then with the BT cotton, They first got farmers to stop saving their own seeds. They managed to get the public sector to stop breeding. And they managed to buy up or lock into licensing arrangements 60 Indian companies that used to produce cotton. Today, those companies can only sell Monsanto's BT cotton. When this cotton was introduced, the price of cotton, local varieties, used to be 5 rupees a kilo if you bought it. If it was your own, it was 0. Monsanto's cotton was about 4,000 rupees a kilo. That's an 8,000 rupee jump. It's supposed to control pests, but it actually created super pests, created new pests. Farmers had to spray more pesticide. In the United States, the herbicide-tolerant crops have created super weeds that cannot be killed with Roundup. 17 million acres of the United States farmland are now overtaken by super weeds. They're now spraying Agent Orange that was sprayed on Vietnam. And a few weeks ago, an investor sued the biotech industry for $1 billion, saying, you have made us invest in a technology which you knew did not work. Because the BT crops are not controlling pests, they're creating super pests. Herbicide-tolerant crops are not controlling weeds, they're creating super weeds. This is a failed technology. So now they're coming up with new myths. They're saying, oh, we'll remove blindness of children with genetically engineered golden rice. We have a little booklet we prepared about golden rice. And probably Sri Lanka and the nutritionists here can do a study on what are the local foods that produce very high amounts of vitamin A. Amaranth leaves, 1,100. Coriander leaves, 1,300. Curry leaves, 1,300. Drumstick leaves, 1,283. 35 micrograms is what the golden rice produces for a gram of food. It's not efficient. We have better alternatives. There are bananas all over Sri Lanka. If I wasn't in a rush, I'd have kept stopping and telling Ravi I want to take a picture of the banana shops. 5, 6, 10 kinds of bananas. They now want to genetically engineer the banana. And the genetically engineered banana is supposed to increase iron to prevent Indian women from dying in childbirth because of iron deficiency anemia. The banana has 0.44 milligrams of iron. They're saying we'll increase it 4 to 5 times, which means they'll take it to 2 or 2.5. You just have to look at the foods that we have. Turmeric, 67.8 compared to 2. Yeah? Just divide each of these numbers by 2 and multiply by 100. You'll see how much more percentage there is, 7,000% more. Amaranth, 11. Moringa, the drumstick, 28. You don't use the millet so much, but our beautiful neem, 25. We have all this wealth given by nature, conserved and improved by our ancestors, the basis of our indigenous knowledge, and we are being told we have nothing. When the world was colonized, there was a legal concept created by the British. It was called terra nullius, the empty land. If there's any territory in the world which does not have white Christian occupants, very convenient definition, because only Europe had whites. The rest of the world was not white. So then take it over as your territory, because all those people with brown skins and black skins are not human beings. They don't have to count as human beings. They define that as a legal justification for takeover of territories around the world, and Britain became the controller of 85% of the territories of the planet. Today, they are perpetuating what I call bio-nullius, empty life. The plant has nothing, diversity is nothing, indigenous knowledge is zero. It's when we add a toxic gene, we create life on Earth. Now, this is not just about technology. We have the venerable monks here. This is about how we see ourselves as human beings on this planet. It's about the deepest concerns about the human condition, which have been addressed by the Buddha. They've been addressed by Christ. They've been addressed in every faith. So it is about our place on earth. And the idea that man, earlier it used to be man is dominator, now it is man is creator. And nothing could be more serious, a threat to the future of this planet, than this illusion. The Buddha always talked about illusion being the big problem. Illusion which then leads to greed, and the greed that then leads to violence, and the violence that then leads to suffering. Now, in India, that debt that was created by B.T. Cotton has pushed 284,000 Indian farmers to suicide. Probably it's crossed that figure because I'm giving you figures from the last census. The government of India keeps the figures for suicides and homicides. And our groundwork tells us that 99% of the suicides are because of indebtedness, because of seeds and chemicals. That is why we need another development model in agriculture. Now, just at the time where three things are becoming so clear in the world. First, that our measures of development and growth are false measures. The GDP, just like the chemicals for war were made the basis of agriculture, GDP was created for the war. It was meant to mobilize resources to be able to expand armies and fighter jets, to increase tanks and naval ships. And it was necessary during that war. But they turned an emergency into a permanent measure. The way GDP is measured is, if you produce what you consume, you don't produce. Now, these amazing, rich farming systems of Sri Lanka, 90% of the produce is consumed locally. It supports an entire prosperous economy, but it's counted as zero. When you chop down your forests and you grow bananas for Dole and Del Monte, and soon they will be genetically modified bananas if we don't stop, suddenly there's growth. The destruction of the most primeval ecosystems, the rainforests, for the most contaminated, toxic banana plantations is defined as growth. And the growth measure is such a false measure that it makes you give up everything that sustains you. The earth, nature's economy, people's economy, destroy it. For 5 years you reach 7% and 8%. We did it in India. We hit 9%, we've dropped down to 6%. Because when you're destroying the very foundation of the economy, the people and nature, you can't sustain it. So India was creating growth, but every fourth Indian is hungry. Every second Indian child is stunted and wasted. Half of India's future is being closed because growth did not look at their nutrition. Growth did not look at how are they growing. Growth looked at a fictitious measure. Now, this fictitious measure can be manipulated so comfortably. England is doing very badly, as is all of the northern countries. You know, they're either negative or they're at 1 or 2% growth. So England solved it very well last month. They increased their growth by 5% by adding 10 billion pounds. Did they create new production systems? Are they growing more food? Did they generate new jobs? No. They said, from now onwards, we will calculate prostitution and drug trade as economic activity. And that sector of prostitution and cocaine trade is worth 10 billion. If countries like Sri Lanka or my country were to follow that path, every woman should become a prostitute. Everyone should give up productive work and just be a drug addict. We will have the economy grow, but we will destroy life. As I said, patenting of life is an obscene measure. I think measuring GDP while we destroy life is also obscene. That's why we need an alternative development model. I work with the government of Bhutan. It's part of our SAARC community. The Prime Minister, the former Prime Minister, invited me to help make a transition to 100% organic Bhutan. Because as he wrote in his letter, I do not see how we can create happiness without organic. And of course I accepted to serve. Bhutan does not measure GDP. At another G77 meeting, the king of Bhutan years ago said, we will not chase growth as a development indicator. We will create happiness and well-being of our people. So they measure GNH. And I think it would be really worthwhile, since so many of you are carrying the heart and soul and mind of Sri Lanka, it would be so good for a group of you to get together to really monitor what's happening to the happiness and well-being of the people of Sri Lanka. In terms of the indicators you already work on. You work on nutrition, you work on peace, you work on satisfaction, you work on agriculture, you work on food security. All of that should now start being shown. I'm going to be releasing a report next month on the real wealth in agriculture. What we're doing is looking at the true costs of industrial globalized agriculture and the true benefits of ecological, biodiverse organic farming. And I can just give you one or two indicators. In biodiverse ecological farming, we measure nutrition per acre. And maximizing nutrition per acre through biodiversity, we can feed 2 Indias with no deficiency of any kind. The farmers who work with us with local seeds and organic farming and are draining nothing out for buying toxics, they also produce better food with higher nutritional quality. They're earning 10 times more than the farmers growing BT cotton or hybrid rice or hybrid corn, because we've not allowed any GMO food crop so far. It's a big issue. Now, Sri Lanka, of course, has been given this seed law. This Seed Act is an effort by the same multinationals that wanted to control the seed and own the seed through genetic engineering, who have failed in their enterprise. They had said by the year 2000, all seed will be genetically modified. Every farmer will be buying seed for us. And for every seed cultivated anywhere in the world, we will be collecting royalties. They didn't manage to succeed for 2 reasons. First, we built the movement. Second, we created international law, like the Convention on Biodiversity, out of which came Biodiversity Acts and Biosafety Acts in every country. That meant that every GMO had to be evaluated, tested, and only then could it be approved. They couldn't pass the test in most countries, so they did something else. Last year, they started this new initiative. Oh, we can't force GMO patents to seed. Let's make local seed illegal. Then there'll be a famine on seed. And then we'll bring our seeds and get the royalty collection. So the Seed Act is a backdoor entry by the multinationals. They've tried it in Europe. I worked with the European Parliament. The law was sent back to the European Commission. They're trying it right now in Africa. All of the countries of Africa, the attempt is to bring one law on seed. One law across the countries, superseding parliaments, superseding the sovereignty of each country. I was in Africa in the early part of June to deal with that assault. Colombia, El Salvador, same law. And the laws come under two garbs. They say you have to sign this to be able to be consistent with WTO and the UPOV. Because we were very active, the WTO did not put UPOV into the language of intellectual property. It said sui generis. In India, I was appointed an expert to write that law. And we put into it farmers' rights. We said the first breeders are farmers. 99.9% breeding has been done by farmers. So you've got to recognize the rights of breeding. First recognize the farmers. Then those who use the farmers' varieties should first pay the farmer, not individuals but collective, because it is a common resource, and take permission from farmers. Can we do this with the seed? That is law in India today. 2004 they tried to undo it, created a similar draft like you have now, and I led a seed satyagraha across the country, carried 100,000 signatures to our Prime Minister, and said we are in the land of Gandhi, who taught us not to obey unjust law like the salt law. And like the salt satyagraha, we will continue our seed satyagraha to uphold the real law of the seed. These seed laws that say there will be compulsory registration are a brainchild of the multinational seed industry. And that is why we have drafted with the top scientists and top legal experts the real law of the seed, the dharma of the seed. The dharma of the seed is it must be shared. Yesterday I was given this beautiful gift at the Metta Convention, and it quotes Buddha. And it basically says, generosity creates in the heart such abundance that sharing comes naturally. In a dharmic society, sharing is an obligation. Nature shares. Nature takes one seed and gives you 1,000,000 seeds. For sharing. It creates abundance. The perverseness of the industry that wants to make profits at the cost of life tells the seed you can't renew. When we sow a seed, we pray, may the seed be exhaustless. Monsanto creates a terminator technology to make it sterile. Creates laws like the seed law or the patent laws to say you can't save seeds. That is a crime against dharma. It's a crime against nature. It's a crime against the earth. It's a crime against farmers. Now, in this draft, which from what Sarah tells me has been translated into Sinhala, we thought very deeply and said, when farmers breed seed, what do they breed for? They breed for diversity, because diversity is insurance. They breed for nutrition and quality. I do not know of a single traditional seed that gives you tasteless food. And I do not know of a single industrial variety that has taste in the food. It's tasteless. The bananas are tasteless. The mangoes are tasteless. The oranges are tasteless. The potatoes are tasteless. The wheat is tasteless. The rice is tasteless. They're even making now an dal. Literally dal, like the iPhone, iPad, and dal. And they were trying to sell it at 25 rupees a kilo when real dal had hit 1,500 during the 2008 food crisis. My sister, who's a doctor, went to the market and picked up this dal, which no one was buying, even though it was only 25. Found in the label, made of soya flour, extruded in the shape of tur dal and colored yellow. So they really think they can create fake food. But fake food, our body recognizes, our palate recognizes. We breed for quality, nutrition, resilience, diversity. The industrial norms are uniformity. But uniformity creates vulnerability to climate change. Uniformity leads to increase in chemical use. In fact, the uniformity is created for chemical use. Uniformity empties out food of health and nutrition and taste. Those uniform monocultures do not produce more food. That's the work we've done in Navdanya. Biodiverse intensive systems actually give you more food per acre, and you can just look with your eyes. A monoculture feed of corn compared to the rich gardens you have. Just compare the two. In biological production, biodiversity production, nutrition, and even incomes of the farmers. But they've managed to convince us. Industrial agriculture with chemicals, with seeds that are uniform, seeds that are patented is the way to go. Look at the costs it has generated. 1 billion people are hungry permanently. 2 billion are sick with diseases of obesity, diabetes, cancer, autism. This morning, the Times of India had a paper citing the Center for Disease Control in the US. In 2 years, autism has increased 35%. And in the CDC report, which I read, it said, and this cannot be because of genetic disorder, because genetic disorder can't explode like that. It is because of increasing toxins in the environment. Since 70s, when they started to look at autism, worldwide, there's been a 30-fold increase in autism. Just like from the child who's hungry in India, we are robbing the future when we push children, even in wealthy societies, into autism. We are robbing a full life. There was a very important study done here in Sri Lanka last year. Because of the increase in kidney diseases in the rice area where Roundup is being sprayed for weed control. Roundup, glyphosate, is a Monsanto chemical. And the study excluded all other factors and zeroed in on this because Roundup chelates, it binds heavy metals. And those heavy metals do organ damage. The study talked about 400,000 people affected by kidney disease, and 20,000 have died in the last 20 years here in Sri Lanka. Immediately, the government ordered a ban on the chemical. 2 weeks later, Monsanto's hidden hand had worked, and the ban was removed. There's a very eminent French scientist who used to be a regulator who did a study on Roundup-ready GMOs. His study was published in the Journal for Food and Chemical Toxicology, peer-reviewed. Monsanto started to put pressure and say, withdraw the study. The editor said, but it's peer-reviewed, scientists have cleared it, there's nothing wrong with it, and we are sorry. Monsanto just changed the editor of the journal, who then said, I retract. You don't do that in science. A paper published is published. Someone else who's smarter writes another paper to show the cutting-edge knowledge. Well, Seralini, Dr. Seralini is his name, he just republished that paper in an environmental journal of Europe. Again, it was peer-reviewed. Again, Monsanto starts the rumors, saying it's not peer-reviewed. Because they are so scared of knowledge. They are so scared of truth. Because I work with the farmers in the belt where farmers are growing BT cotton and committing suicide, and we have made a seed bank. We are training farmers in organic, and we also monitor what's happening with the suicides. And our studies are the only ones that keep coming up every year because we monitor every year. And just like they're after Seralini on his organ failure study, they keep attacking me on the issue of suicide. So earlier they used to make a flat graph. Suicides are like that, BT cotton grew, no change. Now they got more desperate. They've actually made the suicides fall because they're cooking up the data somewhere. The reality is, in the areas where BT cotton is being used, the graph goes up. And this is from the national statistics. I will send you, Sarah, the latest update of this season because we've just completed it. All of this destruction to feed the world? No. Only 30% of the food eaten by people comes from large-scale industrial farms. 70% comes from small-scale family farms. Because family farms grow food. Industrial farms grow commodities. Of all the corn and soya, only 10% goes as food. 90% goes for biofuel and animal feed. At the Earth Summit, Rio Plus 20, where the original Rio, we managed to get the Convention on Biological Diversity passed to protect life on Earth. I also worked very hard with my own government and other governments to introduce an Article 19.3 on the impact of GMOs on biodiversity, out of which came the Biosafety Protocol. President Bush walked out and said, we won't sign this, because if we have sovereign rights to our own seeds and our own knowledge and our own resources, then where does a United States that producing nothing stay as a superpower? There's a very good study, November the 11th, 2011. November the 6th, 2011. One page in the journal called Forbes. Read it. It's called Why Uncle Sam Loves Franken Foods. Franken Foods is the name they use for GMOs in the West. And it's got a simple graph. On everything the US has a negative trade. Everything it is negative. Only in collecting royalties and intellectual property rights and agribusiness control does it have positive. That is why, for them, colonizing the seed of Sri Lanka through the seed law, chopping down the forests of Sri Lanka to hand over as free real estate to a dole for creating a banana republic? No, Sri Lanka deserves better. At this moment, we are not just looking at 500 years of colonization in all its false categories. We are looking at 20 years of a failed project of globalization that has pushed even the West to the brink. Every child in US comes out from college with a $20,000 debt. And that is going to bust. The kids will not pay that debt. They can't. They have no jobs. In Southern Europe, half of the youth are unemployed. Half of the youth are unemployed. I work with them. I work with the Greeks and the Italians and the Spanish and Portuguese. Now, when there's no job, the government has no money, the corporations have walked away, what is the economy you build? The economy you build is the economy we have, which is a living economy of co-creation and co-evolution and partnership with the earth. That living economy is where the real wealth lies. That living economy is where real work and livelihoods are created. That living economy is where freedom is created. And that living economy is where Dhamma really works. And I am absolutely confident with the amazing traditions of science, of religion, of democracy that Sri Lanka has, that you will not allow that Seed Act to be passed. And you will sow the seeds of an alternative development.